Have you ever been in a room full of people and just felt completely, utterly alone? That was my life. On the outside, I was a social butterfly, the friend you could always count on, the one who never missed a thing. But on the inside, I was suffocating under the weight of a performance I never even auditioned for. People would see me pull back into myself and slap a label on it: loner, antisocial, distant. The truth was simpler and way more painful. I was just exhausted from pretending. For years, I tried to outrun this feeling of being disconnected from my own self. So, this isn't a story about the ache of loneliness. It's about how I intentionally chose solitude and how that single terrifying choice ended up saving my life. It is about the day I stopped running from the quiet and finally decided to listen to what it was trying to tell me. For most of my life, my social calendar looked like a measure of my success. Or so I thought. Brunches, birthdays, weekend trips, after-work drinks. My schedule was packed, and my smile was always on. I was fluent in small talk, an expert at mirroring the energy of any room I walked into. You need someone loud and energetic? I could be her. If the mood was more somber, I could be that too. I was a chameleon, and I thought that was a strength. In reality, it was a survival mechanism. Every social event was a stage, and I was the lead actor in a play about a person who was effortlessly outgoing. The price of admission was my own energy, and I was paying way more than I realized. I'd come home from a party where I'd laughed for hours, and the second the door clicked shut, the silence in my apartment would be deafening. The mask would drop, and I'd just feel hollow, a stranger to myself. The person everyone just spent the evening with was a character, and the real me was left behind, totally depleted and unseen. This constant performance created a bizarre paradox. The more people I was around, the more disconnected I felt. It wasn't just that I lacked a real connection. It was the active drain of keeping up all the fake ones. I was surrounded by people, but I felt invisible. The small talk, the inside jokes I didn't really find funny, the pressure to be a certain way, it all started to feel like my life force was just slowly draining away. The social burnout was so real. It felt like walking through deep mud. Every single step took a huge amount of effort, and I was getting nowhere. The fatigue wasn't just physical, it was soul deep. And then came the label, loner. It was usually said with a hint of concern, sometimes with a little judgment. "You've been spending a lot of time by yourself lately," a friend would say, their voice laced with this gentle accusation. They saw my retreat as a problem to fix, a symptom of sadness. They didn't get it. The parties, the noise, the constant pressure to be on, that was the source of my sadness. The moments I had to myself were the only times I could actually breathe. They were my refuge. But society tends to pathologize the need for quiet. People who need a lot of solitude are often seen as broken. Their preference for quiet is seen as a cry for help, when it is really an act of self-preservation. I was treated like I was flawed for valuing quiet time and my own thoughts over a packed social calendar. This misunderstanding just widened the gap between who I was and who people thought I should be, which, of course, made me want to socialize even less. There wasn't one big dramatic crash. It was more like a slow, creeping erosion. It was the 1,000th time I said yes when my entire body was screaming no. It was a panic attack in the bathroom of a crowded bar, hit by a sudden, overwhelming need to escape the pointless noise. It was realizing I was living a life that looked great on paper, but felt totally empty on the inside. I was always running from the void, filling my life with noise, but the truth always catches up. The breaking point came on a perfectly normal Tuesday. I was scrolling through my phone, looking at pictures from a weekend trip with friends. Everyone was smiling, clinking glasses, posing against a beautiful sunset. I was in the photos, smiling just as wide as everyone else. But I couldn't remember feeling any of that joy. I remembered feeling stressed about the schedule, anxious about making conversation, and desperate for just 5 minutes of silence. Looking at that photo, I felt completely alienated from my own life. Who was that person? It wasn't me. That was the moment I stopped. I was done. Done with the chase, the performance, the constant, draining effort of being someone I wasn't. This deep, bone-weary exhaustion had settled over me. I felt like a traveler who had been on the road for too long, knowing the connections made were mostly temporary and ultimately draining. I had a need to interact, but not the want. I hit rock bottom with a sense of despair so heavy it felt physical. So I made a decision, a terrifying, liberating decision. I chose to stop. I canceled my plans for the weekend. And the next one, I started saying no to invitations without offering some long, elaborate excuse. Just, I can't make it. At first, it felt like a betrayal. I was letting people down, breaking that unspoken rule that you have to always be available, always be social. The fear was huge. What if my friends forget about me? What if I end up completely alone, not by my choice, but because they abandoned me? But the exhaustion was stronger than the fear. Something inside me knew that if I kept going down that path, there would be nothing left of me to save. I had to choose loneliness, or what I thought was loneliness, to have any chance of finding myself again. It felt less like a choice and more like a survival instinct. In the beginning, the silence was overwhelming. My home, once just a pit stop between social events, became my whole world. The quiet I'd craved now felt like a vast, empty space, and all the fears and anxieties I'd been running from came rushing in. I had to face the very thing I'd been using noise to avoid, myself. So many of us fear being alone, not because of the quiet, but because of what the quiet might reveal. It forces you to look at your unmet needs and the gap between the life you're reliving and the one you actually want. But as I sat with that discomfort, day after day, something started to shift. I began to understand a crucial difference our hyper-connected world often blurs: the distinction between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is a painful, emotional state of feeling disconnected, even in a crowd. It's the ache of wanting connection and not having it. Solitude, on the other hand, is the physical state of being alone, but it's chosen. It's a voluntary, positive experience. Solitude isn't about the absence of social connection, but about the presence of self-connection. That reframe was my turning point. I wasn't being punished with loneliness. I was gifting myself solitude. This wasn't a sad circumstance. It was an intentional choice. And that made all the difference. Research shows that while forced isolation can be harmful, choosing solitude is a healthy act that can lead to reduced stress and a greater sense of calm. I realized my life had been full of what you might call perceived loneliness. That feeling of being unseen in a crowd, and what I really needed was restorative solitude. I remembered reading how some developmental psychologists talk about this. They note that without chosen alone time to recharge from social fatigue, we can become irritable and moody, which ends up hurting our relationships. That hit me hard. My social burnout wasn't just hurting me. It was making me a worse friend and a more distant family member. I was showing up physically, but I was emotionally checked out. My new life became an experiment in this restorative practice. I was consciously creating a space to recuperate, a zone of protection from the pressures of the outside world. I was no longer trying to fill the silence. I was listening to it. The oppressive quiet slowly turned into a blank canvas, a space where I could finally explore my own thoughts and feelings without the constant filter of what everyone else expected. I was moving away from a life of pleasing everyone and toward a life of understanding myself. And in that quiet space, for the first time in a long time, I started to feel a sense of peace. It wasn't the absence of people that was saving me. It was the presence of myself. Choosing solitude was step one, but learning how to actually be in it was a whole other journey. In our world, being alone is often seen as just waiting, the time between things happening. I had to learn to see it as an active practice. It became my own personal laboratory, a place to notice the stories I was telling myself and to challenge the ones that were unserving me anymore. My days, once run by other people's plans, were now shaped by my own curiosity. I started small. I went for long walks without headphones, just paying attention to the world and my own thoughts. I started journaling, not with a goal, but just to pour my brain onto a page without judgment. That simple act helped me see patterns I'd never noticed, the anxieties on a constant loop, the desires I'd pushed down, the anger I hadn't let myself feel. I learned to just sit and be. At first, it was ridiculously hard. My mind was so used to constant stimulation that it would just race. But I took inspiration from what I was learning about mindfulness and solitude, which is that this practice helps you observe your own thoughts with more clarity and compassion. I learned that solitude can be a deliberate strategy for emotional self-regulation. Instead of immediately reacting to anxiety by calling a friend or scrolling social media, I learned to turn inward and ask, what is this feeling? Studies have shown that even short periods of chosen solitude can help calm strong emotions like anxiety and anger. I was learning to be my own support system. During this time, I rediscovered things I used to love but had abandoned. I picked up a guitar that was collecting dust. I spent whole weekends reading, getting lost in other worlds. I'd go to a museum and just wander at my own pace, only looking at what genuinely interested me. These weren't just hobbies. They were acts of self-discovery. Without having to compromise or consider anyone else's preferences, I was getting to know myself again. Taking that time let me focus on my own interests without worrying about what other people might think. This process wasn't always comfortable. Solitude makes you accountable to yourself. If I felt sad, I couldn't blame it on a weird social interaction. If I felt bored, it was on me to find something meaningful to do. It stripped away my excuses and forced me to get real about my own victim mentality. But through that, I developed a self-reliance I'd never known. The voice in my head slowly started to change from "you can do that" to "I bet you could." I was building confidence not from outside validation, but from the quiet act of keeping promises to myself. I was discovering that solitude wasn't emptiness. It was a space filled with potential, creativity, and the person I was always meant to be. A surprising thing happened as I spent more time alone. My desire to connect with other people came back. But this time, it was different. It wasn't a frantic, needy grab for validation. It was a calm, intentional desire to share the person I was becoming. Solitude didn't turn me into a hermit. It made me a better human. It was like a social detox. This mirrors what many people who embrace solitude find. It actually improves their social lives. When you have enough time to recharge, you can return to your friends and family with more energy and presence. The burnout was gone, replaced by a genuine enthusiasm for connection. I wasn't irritable from social exhaustion anymore. Instead, I felt full. I was now engaging with people from a place of fullness, not a place of need. My relationships transformed. The friendships that were built on the old performance I used to do just naturally fell away, and that was okay. The connections that remained grew deeper and more authentic. Conversations became more meaningful because I wasn't afraid to be myself. I could disagree without fearing rejection. I could listen more deeply because I wasn't busy managing my own social anxiety. I learned that setting boundaries and prioritizing my need for alone time didn't push people away. It attracted the right people and strengthened the bonds that truly mattered. Absence, or rather intentional absence, really did make the heart grow fonder. This journey taught me that solitude is a skill. It's the skill of being in your own company without running away from it. It's about finding the balance between connecting with others and connecting with yourself. And I believe that's a balance everyone deserves to find. My story is just one story, and now I'm curious to hear yours. Have you ever felt social burnout? Have you ever chosen solitude to recharge? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear to feel a little less alone in their desire to be alone. And if this resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more conversations about finding strength in the quiet. I chose to be lonely because I was exhausted from the performance of being social. I stepped away from the world, and in the quiet, I didn't find an empty void. I found the person I had lost. I learned that solitude isn't a punishment. It's a profound act of self-love. It's the reset button that lowers the mental noise so you can finally hear yourself think. It's the secret weapon that lets you show up in the world as your most authentic, energized, and compassionate self. My journey into solitude didn't just save me from burnout. It showed me that the answers I was looking for weren't out there in the world. They were inside me all along, just waiting to be discovered in the quiet. It saved my life by giving me my life back.